One autumn afternoon, the doorbell rang at my California home. When I opened the front door, two police officers stood there. Their expressions were grim, and I knew immediately they had come to deliver grave news. My heart began to race. "Mrs. Morrison?" the older officer asked. "Yes, that's me," I answered. My throat felt dry. "Your husband and son were in a traffic accident. They've been taken to St. Mary's Hospital." The moment I heard those words, my body froze like stone. Time seemed to stop. I couldn't understand what they were saying. No, I didn't want to understand. "What are you saying?" My voice trembled. "But they passed away 5 years ago." The officers exchanged glances. The younger officer checked his notepad while the older one stared at me. "What did you just say?" the older officer asked again. There was clear confusion in his voice. "My husband Michael and my son Daniel went missing in the mountains 5 years ago," I explained desperately. "The search teams looked for days, but their bodies were never found, but it's been 5 years. They're already—" "Mrs. Morrison," the older officer interrupted. "This afternoon, there was a traffic accident on California Route 101. The driver's license showed the name Mark Thompson, but fingerprint analysis confirmed he's Michael Morrison. The boy with him has also been identified as Daniel Morrison." My mind went blank. Mark Thompson. I'd never heard that name before. But Michael's fingerprints. Daniel's name. This had to be some kind of mistake. Forged identification, or someone impersonating my husband and son. "That's impossible," I shook my head. "There's some mistake. Someone has stolen their identities." "Mrs. Morrison, could you come to the hospital?" the younger officer said. "It might be best if you see for yourself." I was confused. Rationally, I knew this had to be some kind of error. 5 years ago, I lost Michael and Daniel. That day, Michael took 3-year-old Daniel on a hiking trip. I had a lecture at the university and couldn't go with them. That night, they didn't come home. Search teams were deployed, and I spent days running through those mountains. But they were never found. Not even their bodies. For 5 years, I'd lived with the pain of that loss. As a psychology professor, I worked to heal others' grief while my own heart's wound never healed. Every year, I visited the mountain where they'd disappeared. I looked at photos of my husband and son every day. So I wouldn't forget their smiles. So I wouldn't forget their voices. But now, the police were saying they were alive. "All right," I said. "I'll go to the hospital." During the drive to the hospital, my mind churned violently. What if it really was them? What if a miracle had happened and they'd been alive somewhere for 5 years? But how could that be possible? Why had there been no contact for 5 years? Why appear now? When we arrived at the hospital, a nurse led me to the patient room. As I walked down the long corridor, my legs trembled. I could barely breathe. I stopped in front of the room's door. I was terrified of what lay beyond it. Taking a deep breath, I placed my hand on the doorknob. Slowly, I opened the door. Inside the room were 2 beds. In one bed lay a man wrapped in bandages. In the other bed was a small boy. The man turned his face toward me. In that instant, all the blood drained from my body. It was unmistakably Michael. He looked a bit older than 5 years ago, but those eyes, that face, that voice. Everything was exactly the Michael I knew. "Jennifer." Michael spoke my name. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. Was this a dream? Or had I gone mad? Then I looked at the smaller bed. The boy was staring at me. Daniel, who had been 3 years old 5 years ago. The face that should now be 8 years old was definitely there. "Mommy." The boy whispered softly. My knees nearly gave way. The nurse quickly supported my arm. Was this real? My husband and son, who were supposed to be dead, were breathing right in front of me. They were alive. What had my 5 years been? The tears I'd cried. The pain of loss I'd carried. Everything felt like it was collapsing in an instant, and all I could do was stand there. In the hospital room, I sank into a chair. The nurse brought me water, but my hands were shaking so badly I couldn't hold the glass. The people in front of me were definitely Michael and Daniel. This wasn't a hallucination. Not a dream. They were really there. Jennifer, Michael spoke my name again. There was something hesitant in his voice. Something like guilt seeping through. What is this? I finally squeezed out words. You two went missing in the mountains 5 years ago. I've been. The words wouldn't continue. A police officer entered the room. He began speaking, carefully choosing his words. Mrs. Morrison, we've confirmed the search records from 5 years ago, and your husband and son's bodies were never found, correct? But the search teams looked for days, I answered. They covered every inch of those mountains. When they couldn't find them, that's why we. The fact that no bodies were found means no official death certificate was issued, the officer continued. Which means, legally, they remained missing persons. I stared at Michael. He looked away. That gesture triggered something in me. Michael, I asked quietly but firmly. Where have you been for 5 years? Silence dominated the room. Michael didn't answer. He just gripped the sheets on his bed. Answer me, my voice trembled. For 5 years, I lived thinking you were dead. Every day, every night, I cried remembering you. I went to the mountains and kept calling your names. And yet, you were alive. Why didn't you contact me? Why now? Michael said nothing. That silence turned my suspicion into certainty. Something was wrong. Something was fundamentally wrong. After leaving the room, I asked a nurse to show me Michael's belongings from when he was admitted. A wallet, a cell phone, keys. I opened the wallet and found a driver's license inside. Mark Thompson. The birth date was the same as Michael's, but the name was different. The address was Austin, Texas. My hands began shaking again. A false name. Michael had been using a false name. Why? Why did my husband have fake identification? I picked up the cell phone. It was locked and I couldn't open it, but one emergency contact number was displayed on the screen. Lisa. The moment I saw that name, a sharp pain shot through my chest. After returning from the hospital, I couldn't sleep at all that night. Michael's silence, the fake driver's license, the name Lisa. Everything was telling me something. But I didn't want to believe it. If I believed it, the meaning of these 5 years would collapse. The next morning, I made a decision. I needed to uncover the truth myself. I called the university and said I'd be canceling classes for a while. Then I contacted a private investigator a former colleague had once recommended. The detective's name was Robert Chen. His office was downtown, and I visited first thing in the afternoon. Professor Morrison, Robert welcomed me. I got the overview on the phone. Your husband and son were found after 5 years. But something's wrong, I said. My husband was using a false name. He had a driver's license with the name Mark Thompson and an address in Texas. I gave Robert the Texas address. He took notes with a serious expression. Understood. I'll investigate this address and the names Michael Morrison and Mark Thompson. I'll contact you immediately when I find anything. 3 days later, Robert called. His voice was tense. Professor Morrison, I need to meet with you. Can you come to my office today? When I arrived at the office, Robert had placed a large envelope on his desk. He took a deep breath before speaking. Professor Morrison, what I'm about to show you is quite shocking. Please prepare yourself. He took photos out of the envelope. The moment I saw the first photo, my heart nearly stopped. It was Michael. But he wasn't alone. Next to him was a young woman. Blonde hair, smiling. The two were sitting on a park bench, leaning against each other intimately. Who is this woman? I asked in a trembling voice. Her name is Lisa Carter. Until 5 years ago, she worked as a secretary at Michael Morrison's architectural firm. Secretary. Lisa. The emergency contact on the cell phone. Everything was starting to connect. Robert showed me the next photo. It showed all three of them, Michael, Lisa, and Daniel. At an amusement park. Daniel was holding cotton candy and laughing. Michael had his hand on Daniel's shoulder, and Lisa was holding Daniel's hand on the other side. Just like a family. When was this photo taken? I asked. 3 months ago, Robert answered. Professor Morrison, according to my investigation, Michael Morrison has been living in Austin, Texas for the past 5 years using the false name Mark Thompson. He's been living with Lisa Carter, and your son Daniel has been with them too. I leaned back in my chair. The room felt like it was spinning. 5 years, I murmured. For 5 years, they've been. Robert opened his report. Michael Morrison, or Mark Thompson, was working in architecture-related jobs in Texas. Lisa Carter was working at a local boutique. They were living in a house in the suburbs. The neighbors apparently thought of them as a normal family. But Daniel, I desperately tried to think. My son should have been going to school. There should be records. He was registered under the name David Thompson. Robert showed me another document. Your son's name had been changed too. Tears overflowed from my eyes. But they weren't tears of sadness, they were tears of anger. So, I forced out the words. My husband abandoned me and started a new life with his mistress. Taking our son. Making me think they were dead. Robert nodded quietly. The mountain incident, I asked. Was that staged? That's highly likely. The reason no bodies were found is probably because there were no bodies to begin with. Mr. Morrison likely took your son into the mountains and escaped via a different route before the search teams arrived. I stood up. I paced around the room. I understood that 5 years of memories had all been lies. Those days I'd screamed in the mountains. Those days I'd cried. Everything had been built on Michael's calculated betrayal. Did you find out anything else? I asked. After hesitating, Robert showed me one last photo. It was a photo of Daniel at school. 8-year-old Daniel, or David, was laughing with his classmates. Your son appears to have grown up these 5 years thinking his father and Lisa Carter were his parents. According to testimony from neighbors, Daniel called Lisa Mom. The moment I heard those words, something inside me broke. My son had been calling another woman Mom. My existence had been erased from Daniel's memory. Thank you, Robert, I said. Can I have copies of all this, the report and the photos? Of course, he answered. Professor Morrison, are you going to the police now? Yes, I answered. Before I see my husband, I'm going to gather all the evidence. This time, I'm the one who'll confront him with the truth. When I left the office, I cried in my car. But those were my last tears. There was no more time to sink into sadness. I had to fight now. The next day, I went back to the hospital. This time with evidence. I'd put all the reports and photos Robert had given me into a large envelope. But first, the person I needed to talk to wasn't Michael. It was Daniel. In front of my son's hospital room, I took a deep breath. I knocked on the door and entered. Daniel was sitting alone on the bed. When he saw me, He looked anxious. "Hello, Daniel," I said gently. "Hello," Daniel answered softly. His voice was trembling. I pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. I took out a photo from the envelope. It was the photo of Michael, Lisa, and Daniel together at the amusement park. "Daniel," I asked quietly. "This is you in this photo, isn't it?" Daniel looked at the photo. His eyes widened. "And this is your father, and," I continued. "Who is this woman?" Daniel bit his lip. Tears welled up in his eyes. "Daniel, I'm not blaming you," I said. "I just want to know the truth. Who is this woman?" "Lisa," Daniel answered softly. "Lisa, Auntie." "Auntie." He didn't call her mom. At least not in front of me. "Daniel," I put down the photo and took his hand. "5 years ago, you went to the mountains with your father, right? When you were 3. Do you remember?" Daniel nodded. "After that, what happened? Where did you and your father go?" Tears overflowed from Daniel's eyes. He desperately wiped them away. "Dad," Daniel said in a trembling voice. "Dad said we were going to start a new life." I didn't really understand, but I followed Dad. "And then?" I prompted. "We went to a different place. A house I didn't know. Lisa was there." Lisa said, "Hi, Daniel. I'm Lisa." My chest tightened. My 3-year-old son had suddenly been made to live with a stranger. "What about me?" I asked. "What did your father say about Mommy?" Daniel turned his face away. He didn't seem to want to answer. "Daniel," I gently turned his face toward me. "Tell me. Please." "Dad," Daniel said while crying. "Dad said Mommy was gone. He said Mommy wasn't coming back." The moment I heard those words, my heart was torn apart. But I held back my tears. I needed to listen to my son's story now. "And you believed him?" I asked. Daniel nodded. "For 5 years, the whole time," Daniel said. "Dad said Mommy was dead. So, You didn't do anything wrong," I said firmly. "You were only 3 years old. You had no choice but to believe what your father said." Daniel stared at me. Questions floated in his eyes. "But," Daniel said. "But Mommy's alive. Mommy is here." "That's right," I answered. "Mommy has been alive all along. I've been looking for you the whole time." Daniel's face contorted. He started crying out loud. "I'm sorry," Daniel said through his tears. "I'm sorry, Mommy." "You don't need to apologize for anything," I held him tight. "You didn't do anything wrong." For a while, we held each other and cried. It felt like the 5-year gap was gradually being filled. When Daniel calmed down, I asked again. "Daniel, can you tell me about the accident? What happened?" Daniel took a deep breath. Then he began to talk. "Last week, I used a computer at school," Daniel said. "The teacher said we should research things on the internet. And then," I prompted. "I suddenly thought, what if I searched for Mommy's name? Dad said Mommy was dead, but maybe I could find out something." My heart pounded fiercely. "So I typed in Jennifer Morrison," Daniel continued. "And Mommy's picture came up. A university teacher's page. A photo of Mommy smiling. When you saw that," I asked. "What did you think?" "At first I couldn't believe it," Daniel said. "But it was Mommy. Definitely Mommy. There was a phone number and address too." Daniel looked at me. "Mommy wasn't dead." I knew Dad had been lying. "So what did you do?" I asked. "I went home and told Dad. I said, I found Mommy. Mommy's alive, Daniel's voice shook. But Dad got angry. Really angry. He yelled, "That's not your mother. Your mother is dead." I clenched my fists. Michael had tried to keep lying to the very end. But I knew, Daniel said. I knew Dad was lying. So. Daniel choked on his words. I squeezed his hand. So I left the house, Daniel continued. I wanted to go find Mommy. I wanted to see Mommy. I wanted to tell Mommy that I was alive. Tears wouldn't stop flowing from my eyes. My 8-year-old son had run away from home to find me. But Dad chased me in the car, Daniel said through tears. He was yelling, "Come back. Your mother is dead." But I yelled back, "That's a lie. Mommy's alive. I saw her on the internet." And then? I asked. Dad's car was going really fast. I tried to cross the road and, Daniel trembled. Dad turned the wheel. And then. Daniel couldn't talk anymore. He kept crying in my arms. I understood everything. 5 years ago, Michael abandoned me and started a new life with his mistress. He lied to our son that I was dead. But our son found the truth. At only 8 years old, he used the internet to find me. And he ran away from home to see me. Michael, trying to stop him, caused the accident. Daniel, I said while stroking his head. You were so brave. Thank you for finding me. Mommy, Daniel looked up at me. I want to be with Mommy. I don't want to be with Dad anymore. It's okay, I held him tightly. Mommy will protect you. We'll never be apart again. After Daniel fell asleep a while later, I left the room. Then I headed to Michael's room. Now it was time to confront him with all the truth. As I walked down the corridor, I gripped the detective's report. The staged disappearance 5 years ago. The new life with his mistress. The lies to our son. And the fact that our son found the truth and tried to find me. Everything was now clear. I stopped in front of Michael's hospital room door. I took a deep breath and opened the door. When Michael saw me, he turned his face away. He knew he couldn't hide anything anymore. We need to talk, Michael, I said coldly. You're going to tell me everything about 5 years of lies. I sat in a chair, took out the photos and reports from the envelope, and spread them across his bed. Michael said nothing. He just froze on the bed. I said quietly but sharply, you were living with another woman in Texas. Making me think you were dead. Michael looked away. Look at this, I thrust the photos in front of his face. This is your new life. With Lisa Carter and my son. Just like a happy family. Jennifer, Michael finally spoke. Listen to me. Listen. I laughed coldly. You, who didn't listen to my words for 5 years, are now telling me to listen. It's not like that, Michael said. There were circumstances. Circumstances, I stood up. Why don't you tell me about these circumstances of yours? But first, let me confirm one thing. The mountain incident 5 years ago, that was staged, wasn't it? Michael fell silent. That silence was the answer. Should I call the police? I said. Or will you tell me everything yourself? Michael exhaled deeply. Then he slowly began to speak. Lisa and I, he said. We had a relationship starting 3 years ago. No, actually it was 6 years ago. From when she started working as a secretary at my company. My fists trembled. 6 years ago. That meant from shortly after Daniel was born. At first it was casual, Michael continued. But before I knew it, I was serious. I wanted to start a new life with Lisa. But you couldn't leave Daniel behind, I anticipated his words. So. So I staged the mountain incident, Michael admitted. That day, I took Daniel into the mountains. But actually, we escaped by car via a different route. Lisa was waiting. I took a deep breath. My body was shaking with anger. Before the search teams arrived, Michael said. We'd already left California. We were headed to Texas. Of course, no bodies were found, I said. There were no bodies to begin with. Michael said nothing. And then, I continued. You started a new life in Texas using a false name. Even changing our son's name. Lying to Daniel that I was dead. Jennifer, Michael started to say. Be quiet, I cut him off. I'm not finished yet. When our son was 8, he found me using the school computer. Your lies were about to crumble. So you desperately kept lying. But Daniel didn't believe you. He tried to come see me. Trying to stop him, you caused an accident. Michael's face twisted. He said in a trembling voice. I was just trying to stop Daniel. If he met you, everything would be over. Everything would be over, I repeated. Your life built on lies, you mean. I took out another document from the envelope. Do you know what this is? I asked. It's a criminal complaint to the police. Kidnapping, faking death, fraud, and various other charges. My lawyer has already prepared it. The color drained from Michael's face. Jennifer, wait, he said frantically. Let's talk. Think about Daniel. Think about Daniel. I laughed coldly. Did you ever once think about Daniel's real happiness in 5 years? You took his mother away from him, kept lying to him, and you're going to say that was for Daniel? I love Daniel, Michael said. Love, I shook my head. If you loved him, you wouldn't take away his right to see his mother. If you loved him, you wouldn't lie. What you did to Daniel wasn't love. It was control. I headed toward the hospital room door. The police will be coming soon, I said, turning back. I recommend you tell them everything. Oh, and you'd better contact Lisa Carter too. She'll be charged as an accomplice to kidnapping. Jennifer. Michael shouted. Please. Give me another chance. I stopped at the door. Chance, I said quietly. 5 years ago, you took away my chance. Every chance to be a husband, a father. Why should I give you a chance now? I left the hospital room. In the corridor, I nodded to the police officers who were already waiting. They entered the room. Several weeks later, the court hearing began. I took the witness stand and testified about everything from these 5 years. The sadness of loss. The nights I cried every day. The days I kept visiting the mountains. And the shock and anger when I learned the truth. Private investigator Robert Chen was also called as a witness. He submitted detailed investigation reports and revealed Michael's actions over 5 years. Records of his life in Texas. Use of a false name. Living with Lisa Carter. Everything was admitted as evidence. Then Daniel took the witness stand. My 8-year-old son, though nervous, spoke clearly in his own words. Dad lied to me, Daniel said. He said Mommy was dead. But Mommy was alive. I found Mommy using the school computer. Mommy was a university teacher. I saw her picture. The courtroom fell silent. When I told Dad I found Mommy, Daniel continued. Dad got angry. He said, "That's not your mother." But I knew. I knew Dad was lying. So what did you do? The prosecutor asked gently. I left the house, Daniel answered. I wanted to go see Mommy. But Dad chased me in the car and... Daniel's voice trembled. From the gallery, I smiled at my son. Daniel looked at me and seemed to calm down a bit. Dad was driving really fast, Daniel continued. Trying to stop me. That's when the accident happened. One last question, the prosecutor said. Who do you want to live with, your father or your mother? Daniel answered without hesitation. Mommy, he said. I want to live with Mommy. Michael in the defendant's seat lowered his face. His shoulders were shaking. Lisa Carter's trial proceeded simultaneously. She wailed and sobbed in court. I didn't know, she said. I didn't know it would come to this. The prosecutor countered. You knew Michael Morrison was married and had a child, didn't you? Yes, but, Lisa said. You knew about his plan to abandon his family and run away with you, didn't you? Yes, Lisa answered softly. In other words, you were an accomplice, the prosecutor concluded. On the day of sentencing, the judge announced with a stern expression. I sentence the defendant Michael Morrison to 20 years in prison for kidnapping, faking death, and fraud. The courtroom buzzed. I sentence the defendant Lisa Carter to 15 years in prison for complicity in kidnapping. Lisa collapsed in tears. Michael listened to the verdict expressionlessly. Furthermore, the judge continued. I order all assets of defendant Morrison to be seized, and $1 million to be paid to plaintiff Jennifer Morrison as damages. Additionally, I revoke defendant Morrison's parental rights to Daniel Morrison and prohibit all visitation rights. I exhaled deeply. The 5-year battle was finally over. As I left the courtroom, Michael called out to me. Jennifer. I turned around. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't answer. I just held Daniel's hand and left the courtroom. There was no need to look back anymore. All I had to do was look ahead. A year has passed since the verdict. Daniel and I started a new life in a house in a quiet California neighborhood. Not the house we lived in before, but a new place. I wanted a truly fresh start, not bound by the shadows of the past. Daniel started attending the local elementary school. The first few months were difficult. Filling the 5-year gap wasn't easy. He sometimes had nightmares. He'd wake up crying in the middle of the night, calling for me. When that happened, I'd go to his room and stay with him until morning. It's okay now, I told him many times. Mommy is here. I'll never let you go again. Little by little, Daniel regained his smile. He made friends at school. He joined the soccer team. On weekends we went to the park together and watched movies. Ordinary, yet irreplaceable days. I resumed my lectures at the university. I chose different themes than before. Loss and recovery. Betrayal and forgiveness. And above all, hope. I spoke about my own experiences from an academic perspective. Many students resonated with my lectures. Some had similar experiences. I hoped my story could offer them even a little hope. Part of the $1 million in damages I saved as education funds for Daniel. The rest I donated to a nonprofit organization supporting people who had lost family members. Money can't erase the past, but it might help someone's future. One autumn afternoon, Daniel came home from school. He put his backpack down in the entryway and rushed into the living room. Mommy, I'm home, Daniel said cheerfully. Welcome back, I smiled. How was school today? It was fun, Daniel answered. I scored a goal in the soccer game. Really? That's wonderful. Daniel sat down next to me. He had a slightly serious expression. Mommy, he said. I'm happy. The moment I heard those words, tears filled my eyes. But they weren't tears of sadness, they were tears of joy. Me too, I hugged him. I'm so happy to be with you. Mommy, Daniel looked up at me. Thank you. For looking for me. For not giving up on me. Of course, I stroked his head. You're my precious son. Looking out the window, the sunset was beginning. Orange light gently illuminated the living room. 5 years ago, I thought I'd lost everything. But now, I've gotten everything back. No, I've gained more than that. The bond with my son has become much stronger than before. I myself have become stronger than before. The pain of the past doesn't disappear. But I can live with that pain. And beyond it, I can find new happiness. I learned that firsthand. Daniel, I said. How about we go somewhere tomorrow? Just the two of us. Really? Daniel's eyes lit up. Where are we going? How about the ocean? We can play on the beach and eat delicious seafood. I want to go. Daniel answered happily. The next day, we headed to the ocean. Blue sky, white clouds, and the vast sea. Daniel ran around on the beach and played with the waves. His laughter echoed on the sea breeze. Watching him, I thought, this is my life. A real life I reached after overcoming all the pain of the past and the betrayal. In the evening, on the drive home, Daniel said sleepily. Mommy, today was the best day ever. Yes, I answered. Let's create lots of wonderful days like this from now on. Yeah, Daniel smiled and closed his eyes. I continued driving, facing forward. The road stretched straight ahead. I don't know what difficulties await us. But I'm not afraid anymore. As long as I walk with my son, I can overcome any path. Believing that, we continue walking our new life, one step at a time.